Hello, welcome here to another edition of Husker Online Headlines. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple. We're back again. This is a new show. We brought it last week. It was wildly well received by our followers here on the Husker Online channel, as well as on the website, HuskerOnline.com. And plus, you get to see Steve Sipple now twice in a week on camera. We brought you the Husker Online radio show as well. We're going to be cameraed up for that now going forward every week. Looking forward to this. Sip is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you know what, Sean? There's a lot to talk about. So we don't need a lot of small talk.
Let's get into headline number one. Headline number one and breaking news here on HuskerOnline.com from Thursday. Former five-star tight end Arik Gilbert confirmed to me that he did visit Nebraska on a visit Saturday. He was one of 3 Georgia Bulldogs that took his visit to Nebraska that day, joined by edge rusher MJ Sherman, and then the other tight end from, so there are 2 tight ends from Georgia here, Brett Seether, who's now committed to Georgia Tech. They were here, but now the transfer focus is on Arik Gilbert. Sip. He's listed in the Nebraska student directory already. He made it sound like to me Nebraska's in a great spot. Would this be a big time addition?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, the vision, you have an immediate vision of Arik. You're going to say Arik Gilbert? It's Arik. Yeah, you have this vision of Gilbert and Fedoni. I mean, 2 highly recruited tight ends. I mean, some of the nation's most highly recruited tight ends in the same offense. A couple of the nation's most highly recruited tight ends in the same offense. Yeah, and then just this. It's an interesting development what's happened here with these Georgia guys, with 3, pretty highly recruited, especially MJ Sherman, who obviously has pledged to Nebraska, edge rusher, former 5-star player from Baltimore. And then Brett Seether, not as highly recruited, but Georgia's Georgia. So it's really interesting that these Georgia players, one by one, have made their way to Nebraska. But yeah, Gilbert, Sean, is proven at a high level. Played at LSU, played well enough to be he had 35 catches.
He was a second-team preseason All-American,
right?
Heading into 2021,
35 catches at LSU. He's proven. So yeah, Sean. This is a monster development for Nebraska.
Yeah, the other question, though, is clearly there are things that kept him off the field at Georgia. The talent is not one of them. He was the consensus number 1 tight end. He was all SEC freshman in 2020 during that COVID year. But other elements, I just think, limited him, obviously. Can Nebraska get that figured out to get him back to the player he was in 2020?
Well, Nebraska, you would agree, I think anybody would agree that's familiar with Nebraska at all, is an excellent support system ranging from academics to mental health, everything. They have the whole package at Nebraska. Nebraska prides itself on being a whole package program, right? You'd never describe Nebraska as just a football-oriented football factory. It's not. It's a very multifaceted organization that takes care of players in every way imaginable, from the training table to medical to medical staff, everything. So yeah, this would be a good spot for Arik. And per your report, Sean, on Husker Online, it sounds like Nebraska's got a great shot at him. If you read his quotes, it looks like Nebraska's the leader to me.
Yeah, and he wouldn't get in. Now he's taking other visits. He's gone to other Big Ten and Mountain West programs.
West.
And he didn't want to get into details of where he's visited. And that's not uncommon. Transfer portal people and guys in general don't like to tweet their offers, talk about their visits. You have to really go full detective to get a lot of information on the portal guys. And was lucky enough to reach Gilbert today. And I put in my prediction that he's going to go to Nebraska. Just based on our conversation, based on the fact he's listed in the NU student directory. There's some other elements that have to be worked out. His mom came, though, with him, his brother and his sister. So he had a lot of family here. I think his support group, they want to be behind him on this decision and be on the same page. I think there's a lot more than just football here, and they want to make sure this is the right place for him.
I understand that. Now, as far as football is concerned, what does Nebraska have at tight end? I mean, the conversation starts with Thomas Fedoni, who's missed back-to-back seasons because of major knee injuries. But Sean, you have seen him, you have heard from people. He seems like he's ready to roll Thomas Fedoni.
Yeah, he's over 250 right now.
Okay. And he's
a monster. I mean, he looks like an NFL tight end. Then after that,
Borkature.
You get down to Borkature, you get down to AJ Rollins.
Borkature played this year though, and I think he had a half dozen catches. You know what, Borkature was interesting to me because he struggled early. He had a couple drops early in the season, but kind of came on. And I'd feel pretty good with Fedoni, Borkature, and Arik Gilbert if Arik Gilbert's able to contribute immediately. Just with those three, I'd feel pretty good. Didn't you have Rollins?
And that's where I think a lot of this movement's come. I don't know if they feel great about those other guys.
AJ Rollins, right?
James Carney.
I mean, you have some freshmen, and you have Androff.
Chase Androff's more of an offensive line body, not a receiving threat. I mean, they've got 2 NFL prospects on this roster. I mean, I'm not saying they're draft picks right now, but if they got Arik Gilbert and Fedoni, those are 2 NFL prospects.
Yep. Yeah, and it's almost kind of hard to wrap your arms around it. Like they would have Fedoni and Gilbert. Also, we left out Chris Hickman, who's been injury prone and has kind of went back and forth between receiver and tight end.
And Hickman's never been able to play more than 100 snaps in a season. He's just kind of run into his body, and just hasn't been able to cooperate to get him to where he needs to be. He hasn't been able to gain the weight either to be a physical tight end.
It's interesting though, Sean, from the standpoint of we just rattled off 7 tight ends there. I mean, it's not like the room is empty. They have bodies, but they don't have a lot of proven weapons. You can't say Fedoni's a proven weapon. Borkature is as proven as it gets. Hickman is as proven as it gets, but those guys are lightly proven.
All right, let's go on. Headline number 2, Nebraska under Matt Rhule in 2023. Is this a rebuild or a total reset, Sip? What do you think?
It does not strike me as a rebuild. I just don't. If you look at the roster with what they have back on both sides of the ball, but particularly on defense, it doesn't look to me like it looks like a team that I don't want to say should, but it looks like a team that could win 6, 7, 8 games. People get so tired of us saying things like that, I think, but
they're close.
I just don't. I mean, you're talking about 8 or 9 guys back on defense. You're talking about guys, and I'll name some of them. These are pretty proven players: Ty Robinson, and Nick Henrich, and Reimer. Stephon Wynn, I think you'd have to add him up front on that D line. It really gets good in the back end when you're talking about Quentin Newsome as a returning starting corner. Malcolm Hartzog is returning starting corner. Miles Farmer is returning starting safety. Marquise Buford returning starting safety. All these guys have a lot of experience on the offensive side of the ball. Look, you have 2 quarterbacks that you feel pretty good about now on campus. Jeff Sims, the transfer from Georgia Tech, and of course Casey Thompson. And we'll talk more about that later. Running back room is good. I mean, it's good. You're in good shape at running back. If you get this tight end room shaped up like it looks like it could, add a little bit more to receiver. They've added a big one in Billy Kemp. Come on. I mean, this isn't a team you look at and go, wow, they are woefully undermanned.
No, they're bringing in, as of to date, 8 new scholarship receivers. My concern still is on offense is the tackle position. Can Teddy Prohaska get himself back?
And right tackle.
And then right tackle.
Yeah.
Is Corcoran the right tackle, or is he a guard? Is Benhart the right tackle? Walter Rouse teased us for about 72 hours so they had the tackle situation all figured out. But
they did.
Now they're kind of back to square one. They got a center. I mean, they essentially got the guy they wanted to replace Cam Jurgens 2 years ago, this year, in Ben Scott. And now the tackle situation. Then on defense, my concern probably is the beef up front.
Yeah.
Do they have the beef?
Right. Now that's where if you're on the side of rebuild, I would start with both lines. I think the rebuild, if you're in the rebuild camp, you're saying, come on, guys, They just don't have the offensive line struggled, and it's not going to be too much different. And then you'd switch over to the defensive line and say they don't. I mean, they flat need to add bodies to that defensive line. Losing Colton Feast was pretty big. I know people kind of scoff at that, but Feast was a good run stopping.
He's going to give you 40 snaps.
Yeah, high motor, played a ton of snaps. So yeah, that's where you'd start. If you're really in this reset or rebuild camp, that's where you'd start.
You look at the D line, do they have enough there with Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, Stephon Wynn, and Elijah Judy? Can those
would you add Ruquan Buckley to that?
Hasn't played.
So but it's time now.
Yeah, can he get ready? And I hate to say a freshman, like could Vincent Carroll Jackson or Riley Van Paul? I don't ever like to.
Hard to do that.
Hard to put those freshmen up there. And the edge guys they brought in, how will that position look? MJ Sherman, Chief Borders, Kai Whalen, Jamari Butler, Blaze Gunnerson. But I'm talking about I'm more zoned in on that 280 to 320 pound guy. Do they have enough of those on the defense?
You should be zoned in on that.
They got enough 240, 250 pound guys, but what about those 300 pound guys?
See, part of the reason it's an interesting discussion is because that's Matt Rhule, the head coach. That's his forte, those trenches. I mean, he was a defensive line coach. He talked about at the podium how he feels more comfortable around the big men. I mean, I don't know, Sean. When we look at these additions, now that we're talking about it, Arik Gilbert, you'd almost wish that was a Georgia 300-pound lineman from Atlanta. I mean, they need a tight end for sure, but yeah. God, and you're so right about Walter Rouse. They had that tackle that they need. They had him in their clutches, and he got away, and that's why you put it pretty well the other day. That knocked a lot of Nebraska fans off their horse. It did. I mean, it was a jolt. I was in my kitchen at the time.
I almost didn't believe it, to be honest.
I know. I was.
I can't imagine doing interviews like he did and then changing your mind like 2 days later.
Sean, you can imagine.
I can imagine.
Because you're in that world. You're in that world.
But it's just grown men, though, 4th year, 5th year college guys that have a Stanford degree. Usually they're pretty measured in what they say.
Yeah.
So that surprised me. It really surprised me.
That's fair.
All right. Well, it will be interesting to see kind of how this build continues. The coaches are on the road. One more week for recruiting. Classes start Monday. So they can still keep doing some things. But this roster has come a long ways in a month under Matt Rhule.
Sean, one other thing before we go on. You said it the other day. Since 2021, how many players have been added? Did you say 60 some?
Over 60. If you count Brandon Moore as a scholarship guy last year, he would have been the 34th they added last year. I don't know the technicalities if he was a walk-on or scholarship. I think they did give him money though. So Brandon Moore would have been 34. Right now, Nebraska's at 32. So that's 66 scholarship additions, really in 2 cycles.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Pretty nuts.
Yeah.
All right, headline number 3. Both Casey Thompson and Jeff Sims, Nebraska's quarterbacks, got their NIL deals officially announced by the 1890 collective. Who will win the job? What do you read into the collective announcing both quarterbacks, kind of already staging up what's going to be a good battle, I think, in August?
Well, one thing you read into, for instance, Sims, his announcement this morning, it's Thursday morning, and then the other announcements like Ben Scott. One thing you would not, it's not even reading into it, it's just a fact. It signifies that they're on campus and ready to roll. Okay. So Jeff Sims, 1890, the Nebraska's collective announces Jeff Sims has an NIL deal in place this morning, early Thursday morning. That tells you as a Nebraska fan, Sims is on campus ready to go. It's a good sign. When those things are announced, that means those new guys are on campus. So Sims is on campus, ready to go. This quarterback discussion right now, Sean, is a secondary story. It feels like it's not foremost in everybody's mind because the roster configuration is largely what's foremost in people's mind. The quarterback story is going to become a big one at some point because Sims already has such a presence he's here. He's going to work in the spring. He's going to be the guy in the spring. He's going to get a lot. Hey, Sean, we're going to be writing a lot about Jeff Sims. And you know what? Meanwhile, what's Casey doing? Casey Thompson recovering from his shoulder surgery. Probably not going to practice in the spring at all. His dad indicated to us, Charles, that he can be throwing in the spring during spring ball at some point, probably midway through spring, but not quite ready to practice. So what's that mean? It means that Sims is going to be getting a lot of attention from the media.
and what if he looks really good?
Well, that'd be good. I mean, it'd be good. Now, what would that mean for Casey? The feeling I get from not only Charles, but someone close to Casey that I talked to last night is Casey's attitude is bring it on. Bring it on. Okay. Casey doesn't have to really prove anything to anybody after last season. He stood in there behind, just I'll say suspect offensive line because I'm feeling kind, and got a lot done for the offense. And you saw what happened when Casey wasn't out there. It was a monster drop off.
Remember when Steve Sarkisian came to Texas?
Yeah,
he didn't want Casey Thompson to be a starter either.
Right.
Casey was a Tom Herman, Tim Beck guy.
Yes.
And so what did Herman try to do? Insert his guy over Casey. Casey ended up winning that job. God. He didn't start the first game or two. So this is not his first rodeo of a new coach coming in, trying to push his guy out. And then Casey ended up taking the job from that quarterback. Is that the guy that transferred to Purdue?
Yes. I can't say his name right now, but you're exactly right. And what I like about Casey is he has his jaw set. I mean, he's comfortable in his own skin. And I think he knows the game by now. When I'm talking about the game, Sean, I'm talking about the media and the way it's going to play out. And Sims is going to get
Hudson Card.
Yeah, Hudson Card is he lost a job to Hudson Card. And then it's going to be a big, it's going to be a big to-do over the shiny new toy, Jeff Sims. Now, this is not to diminish Jeff Sims, and I'm not doing that. Sims, Sean, when I remember, I told you it took me a little while to watch his film, Jeff Sims, but when I did, I was struck in a good way. I was like, wait, this is real. I mean, Jeff Sims can run, and he throws the ball down the field well, and he has great poise. Now, consistency, that's another thing. I mean, consistency, he has to achieve greater consistency, and he's been injury prone. Casey, though, you kind of say the same thing. Casey's not as consistent as you'd like, and he's been a little injury prone. So I don't know. They look pretty close to me. Sean, here's the deal, okay? This is going to come down now, and this is where I wish we could see practice. Because you know what this is, Sean? What's the offense? Who fits the offense better? I mean, what
do we know? By the way, do we know like all scrimmages will be shut down?
I don't know, but if they're running the quarterback, who's got that leg up in that? Who would have the leg up, Sean?
Jeff Sims.
Yeah,
he's 6'4". 220?
Yeah, if they're going to incorporate the quarterback run game like they've sort of hinted, then I think you would give the nod to Sims. Now, what Charles Thompson says? Wait a second. He'd say, wait a second, Sean. Casey coming out of high school, the narrative was he's a runner, but can he throw? Now the narrative with Casey is he's a thrower, but can he run? So I don't know. I wouldn't count out Casey in anything right now.
It's going to be interesting how they rep it, though, because
when August comes around.
What if they don't give you? Okay, go back. This is a bad example, but Joe Daly, when Zach Taylor was here, like there became a point that spring where you just kind of knew Zach Taylor was going to take over. And in the spring game that year, they put Joe Daly down with like the bad offense.
Yeah,
and they ran like all out blitzes on him the entire game. Like you can stage a battle how you want to stage a battle.
Yeah, you can.
Like you can say when he's in, we're going to run our stunts and movements.
I just don't think you could do that to a proven quarterback like Casey.
Well, and what about there's other things.
Hey, hold on, Sean. I mean, Joe Daly Casey started 10 games at Texas and started 10 games at Nebraska. You can't treat him like that.
No, I'm just using an example of how you can stage a battle to go the way you want it.
Yeah, you can.
And rep it the way you want to rep it.
You can.
And that can paint the picture.
Yeah, but you know what? You can paint the picture, Sean. You can also lose some players on the team. You know, Casey's got guys that respect him. And if he's disrespected in that vein, that's not good. I mean, those coaches know that.
There's other things too, like decisions like Big Ten media days. Who represents Nebraska at a like because like if you were just all things turned off, Casey Thompson would be like the representative at some point. He's not probably gonna be though, obviously.
Well, you don't know. You don't know.
But I'm looking at my chart here of seniors, and it will be. I mean, you might just stick an offensive lineman out there to media days. I don't know who that would be. I really Ty Robinson. He'll go to Ty Robinson, Nick Henrich. Those two probably.
I'd make it defense heavy.
Or Quentin Newsom.
Yeah,
Quentin Newsom went last year though. So would they? But yeah, just we're way down the road here. But like finding an offensive guy, I'm just looking right now to go to Big Ten media days. A lot easier said than done.
Yeah, I'll find an offensive guy. Right?
Anthony Grant, they're probably not taking. I mean,
I don't know, but what you're getting at, Sean, is do you send Jeff Sims there? No,
I don't think you do.
I don't think so. I mean, keep in mind. So people are going, what are you guys even talking about? Well, Big Ten Media Days is end of July.
You anoint your players.
Yeah, it's the end of July. There wouldn't even have been a quarterback competition at that point. The competition would start basically in a week after Big Ten Media Days, right? Because camp will start in early August or late July. Then it's game on. Right now, it's a secondary discussion because Casey's not going to be around in the spring, but that is going to heat up. That discussion will heat up.
Yeah, you take Casey out of the discussion of players to go to media days. There is not a slam dunk guy on offense you would bring right now.
Can you find an offensive lineman like Turner Corcoran?
Yeah, that's an offensive lineman like Turner Corcoran or Ethan Piper, someone like that. Maybe
you could send Marcus Washington there too.
Could you?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's
leading returning receiver. Yeah.
I think a lot will depend on who they feel like their best players are in the spring, but there's a lot of politics. Besides, if they took Sims to media days.
Oh God. Yeah. I don't even know what to say about that. I mean, I just don't think you want to.
I don't think you do that.
I don't think you open up that can of worms. And again, I sound like I'm protective of Casey. I have a lot of, I'm not, but I have a lot of respect for what he did. I mean, I have that image in my mind all the time of Rutgers. I don't know. You were there, Sean, when at the end of the first half, he got hit from the left, he got hit from the right, and he got hit up the middle. I mean, he got hit from all sides, crawled off the turf, went into the locker room. I think they had to take all his pads off and rewrap him. And remember, we were watching guys come out of the tunnel for the second half. He was the last out. He came with like 30 seconds left before the play was set to resume, had to get retaped and let him do a victory. Those are the kind of things I think about. I think about Iowa, how Sean, Iowa, they built a game plan that was designed to throw it downfield throws to Palmer. You can't do that with a lot of quarterbacks. You can do that with Casey Thompson, though, because he throws the ball well downfield.
Jeff Sims does too.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, he's got a good arm.
Yeah, he does.
All right, let's move on. Next headline, staying on quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Why you can't count Nebraska out of the Dylan Raiola sweepstakes. Matt Rhule was there Friday. Offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield was there on Wednesday. You're able to visit a prospect once per week over this month of January. Why was Friday last week important? It was the first physical day coaches could go out on the road. Dylan Raiola decommitted from Ohio State on the final day of the December recruiting evaluation period.
Okay.
So coaches couldn't see him back in December because he decommitted on the final day of live activity. So that Friday was a big day, not a surprise at all. Donovan Raiola, his uncle, and Matt Rhule were down there, and not a surprise at all that Marcus Satterfield's back on Wednesday. Sipple, Nebraska gets one more meeting at Raiola's school next week. You can go to a school once per week in the month of January. Handicap this thing right now with Dylan Raiola.
Well, I mean, without just getting into idle speculation, and I don't mind saying this because I talked to Dominic about it, Dominic Raiola. I talked to Dominic yesterday, so it would have been Wednesday. The player's father, Dylan's father, and I have to, me and Dom have had this discussion. I have to be careful about what I say. I mean, I'm going to be careful, but I'm going to tell you this. Dominic doesn't mind me sharing this. Dominic likes the way this Nebraska staff recruits his son. He likes it better. I mean, than the previous staff. Dominic, I would say, from talking to Dominic, there's no question that Nebraska's made a strong early impression on Dylan. Now, Georgia's Georgia. I mean, Georgia, Kirby Smart leads the way in that recruitment, and it's serious. I mean, they are serious about getting Dylan Raiola. Of course they are. Oregon, I'd say USC is, USC would be on that line with Nebraska after Georgia, but Nebraska's right there. And Dominic is a football junkie. And that's what Rhule is. That's what Satterfield is. You heard Satterfield say that. They connect well. There's a strong connection. I'll just leave it at that. I mean, right now, Dominic doesn't mind me sharing that he likes the early impression of this staff. Nebraska's in the hunt, Sean.
And the recruiting rules right now are strange. Like, they can't go to his house because he's an underclassman. So these aren't in-home visits, which completely changed the game. Like, when they're there, they have to be at the school. Now, I do believe, like, his uncle, obviously Donovan, he can go to the house. So Nebraska has,
yeah, they have
some
I think he can. Yeah.
Well, yeah, he's his uncle. I mean, that is okay. But I think for Rhule to go with them, I don't think that would. There's a lot of gray area with Nebraska's what they can and can't do with Dylan Raiola because of the former player status, because of having Donovan on the staff. But Nebraska's got advantages in this that a lot of teams don't. We know Georgia's got the advantage of who they are, number one, and obviously being the first offer, number two. But I think the Huskers, if they can get him back in March, Sip, and the dialogue continues, because it's a dead period in February. You can't do anything in February. So that's why this next week, the final visit, will be really important.
Yeah, I'll try to make a horse racing analogy. Georgia probably going into the, I'd say, late backstretch of this race. Georgia's in front, okay? But Nebraska, USC are right behind. And I would say this, any horse racing fan understands this, Sean. I'd say Nebraska has a lot of horse under it. I mean, there's a lot of horse there. That horse could make a charge. Now, it's Dylan. It's not Dominic that's making the decision. Dominic will make that clear to you. Dylan's making the decision. I would say right now he's got a hard decision to make.
All right, let's move on. Final headline here on Husker Online Headlines. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple here. Roster twists and turns for Nebraska. Are we going to see more? Classes start Monday. Workouts started this week. You could technically enroll as late as January 30th. So things aren't shut off quite yet on Monday. There's always a chance they can keep adding players. But my question is, how are they going to have room? I mean, they're almost building this like an NFL roster with a cutting system involved, because they're going to be far over the number of 85. We know that.
How far?
10 plus.
Yeah, they got to figure something out there.
But I think there's some players on there that aren't going to be around, that we already know, some, I don't want to name names.
No, you don't need
but I think there's some that will take care of itself, but they're going to have to probably let loose at least 10 guys.
Yeah, let loose some matriculate naturally because of surgeries on previous injuries. You hope for some natural matriculation, really. But now some guys are just going to have to, some guys will leave on their own accord. Sean, you've been doing this for a long time, and we've had these discussions for a long time over this 85 scholarship limit. I don't get into it too much because it always works itself out, right?
Now, the difference now,
what's the difference?
A year ago is they took the cap off.
Yeah.
Okay. So you used to only be able to take 25 initials.
Okay.
And it made each one of those 25 spots valuable. They were like having cigarettes in jail. They were gold, like, I mean, you did not want to give up one of those 25.
Right.
And so you had to get creative. If you remember, like Oliver Martin had to come here as a walk-on.
Right.
They had to do that with a couple of guys that were higher profile transfers. They had to come in as a walk-on for a semester just to give them money. Like Nuri Nweli had a walk-on.
So there's no cap. So what you're telling people is
you can go over 25,
but you can't go over 85.
No. And the only rule that's in place is you've got to be at 85 in August, period.
Okay.
So you can be as over as you want, but the old Big Ten rule used to be a 25 plus 3. So you could go 3 over 25. That's no more. They've eliminated the cap. They've eliminated the plus 3. And the transfer portal is why. Back when you could only take JUCOs in high schools, 25 was more than enough. But when you add the transfer portal, it's like a whole separate, form of revenue. I mean, it's like a stock portfolio with bonds and stocks, and you kind of have to diversify your funds a little bit. And so for Nebraska and a lot of teams, you're going to take 8 to 12 transfers a year.
Yeah.
You're going to take 20 high school guys or more a year. You're going to take a couple JUCO guys. And then you're going to have to move out about 8 or 10 guys a year. So we're seeing that a lot right now.
Yeah. So what you're saying is stay tuned, and in particular, watch Arik Gilbert, right? I mean, this is the one that you broke.
And then the high school guys coming in this weekend.
Right. There's still, if you're a Husker football fan, there is plenty to follow right now.
And if you're wondering on the numbers, Nebraska Sipple had 11 scholarship players officially leave the program by the transfer portal. They had a few come back in the program, like Jamari Butler, Xavier Betts, and then obviously Isaiah Garcia Castaneda.
Yeah.
Those 3 came back, but 11 after that. Where does that stand in the conference? Indiana led the league with 19.
19 what?
Transfers out of the program.
Out of the program.
The fewest, take a guess.
Michigan.
Ohio State and Illinois, 6 each.
Yeah, I guess Michigan did have a few now that, say again, Illinois, very few too. Okay.
6.
Yeah.
Prep
Who was second? Who was second in most? You got it in front of you.
Pull this up here right now.
Yeah.
I don't have
my
it.
bad.
I'd have to get
Don't worry about it. I mean, that's college football. And when you have a change in coaching staff, you just know that there's going to be a big roster shake.
So Nebraska's added, before Gilbert, 9 transfer players. Wisconsin and Michigan State lead the league with 13.
Okay.
How about Wisconsin?
Yeah.
13.
Coaching change.
Take a shot. Take a guess. How many transfers has Northwestern added?
They've added 2.
1.
Oh, God. Wow.
1. Well,
wow. They needed to add some.
They don't let guys in like you or I at a place like Northwestern. I mean, you got to meet a
Speak for yourself there, South, though.
Did you score 30 on your ACT?
I'm not disclosing what I just scored.
I learned quickly there weren't a lot of Big Ten schools I would have got into. Good thing we got our good educations at Nebraska, but
don't disparage your alma mater that, Sean.
I wouldn't have gone anywhere else. I loved my experience at Nebraska, and it was a great play. So Purdue and Rutgers have only added 3. That surprises me. You look at it around the league, Purdue with a new coach.
Yeah.
But Braum left there kind of late.
Yeah.
So their new coach, Ryan Walters, has only taken 3 new transfers, but he got Hudson Card to go there.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to comment when I'd have to look at their roster situation. But yeah, I mean, Nebraska, I just know Nebraska, there's definite needs. They've done a pretty good job addressing them. But going back to our discussion earlier, the lines are what I guess it seems like we've had this concern for a few years now.
So what's next? The portal's closed. Classes start Monday. You got a whole week still to get in, but the next window, it's actually April 15th to April 30th. They moved it. It used to be May 1 to May 15th.
Wait a second. When did that happen?
In October. It got altered in October.
Yeah, we've been saying May 1 to
it didn't get a lot of publicity, but the next portal window now is April 15th through April 30th. They pushed it back to mirror closer to spring football.
Will Nebraska be done with spring football at that point?
The spring game at Nebraska is what, the 22nd?
Oh, God. So that could mean some players are going in the portal before the spring
game.
Rhule
will have a whole week. I think, let me double check that April 22nd date. April 22nd is the red-white spring game for Nebraska. So Rhule will have a whole week after spring ball to kind of iron. I mean, that Monday, Tuesday after spring ball, Wednesday, are we pretty busy?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, basically what you're telling me, if I'm not mistaken, is there could be portal movement at Nebraska before they even play the spring game, right?
Or you could have some guys that know they're leaving and don't even want to play in the spring game to risk injury.
Yeah. If in an ideal world, I would think if I were a head coach, I'd say I want our spring game to occur before the portal reopens.
Like, remember Kurt?
Am I wrong on that?
Kurt Rafdal did that.
Yeah.
He left to not go through spring ball because he knew he was leaving. And then he went to Boise State.
Right.
Then all those tight ends got hurt for Nebraska, and he probably would have played that next year. But your question was, can you move the spring? I feel like
it's not my question. That's what I do. I'd move the spring game so it aligns with when the portal opens.
I will say this, and I know this from the previous staff too. The date of the spring game has become more of a political decision up top than a coaching staff decision.
How so?
Because they build a lot of the on-campus events and things around it. And Trev Alberts, the last 2 years, has announced the date of the spring game.
Yeah. Okay.
Like he has made the call on, with the university side. And, last year's spring game date didn't really help Nebraska in a lot of respects because I want to say it was earlier. And then it allowed more time to like linger. And that allowed like Casey Rogers and some other guys to shop around after the spring game was over. So, yeah, I think in a perfect world, if you could kind of mirror so you're saying, okay, would you have your spring game later? Or?
No, I'd have it done before the portal opens. I'd have it done April 15th.
The other issue though was winter conditioning.
I'd have it done at least
Nebraska's got a great setup.
Sean, what I'm talking about is your spring game is occurring
in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
In the middle of duck hunting season.
Right. So you could have guys just bow out of the spring game.
You could also host transfer visitors now during the spring game weekend. Think about that. Think about that.
Yeah, I am thinking about it. It's going to be wild.
April 15th opens, spring game the 22nd. Yeah. You might have transfers visiting.
Visiting, which is, I guess,
ideal.
You would say, yeah, you'd want that.
That's what I mean. That's your best bet.
God, yeah, you want that. Yeah.
Be a big 18.
Okay, that's an argument opposed to mine. I'm just looking for cleanliness. Just okay, we're done with this. We're done with spring. Now we address the portal. Guys make decisions. They jump in. Guys coming in, they jump in too.
I'm a bigger fan, though, of a later spring game at Nebraska for the weather reasons. Like, I think when you go too early, I mean, there was one year where it was like April 7th or something, and you're rolling the dice.
Yeah.
Because sometimes spring's the worst season in Nebraska. Yeah. I mean, it's miserable sometimes, but it will be interesting to see kind of how that shapes out. And, something else why spring is kind of later now, Sipple, is the way the calendar's changed at Nebraska. The semester starts 2 weeks later than it used to because there's a mini session built in the middle after Christmas break before classes start. So, if you remember when we were in school, like we were always in school and had Martin Luther King Day as a day off of college. Now they have 2 weeks before. And so like they don't start class until the 23rd, where it would have been 2 weeks earlier. That pushes the start of spring ball later, but it gives Nebraska 8 weeks for winter conditioning. Then you got spring break. You got to have a week in there. And were you a fan of breaking up spring ball? Do you like breaking it up, or would you rather do 5 straight weeks?
Rather do 5 straight weeks.
And so that's what they're going to be able to do.
Yeah, I think that's
good. I think we don't know that. And we also don't know if they're going to practice in the afternoon. That's probably something we'll have to learn from Rhule here.
We're in pretty far into the weeds at this point, Sean.
That's a whole nother headline show. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us here on Husker Online Headlines. If you're not a member of HuskerOnline.com, check us out. You can get access to HuskerOnline.com all the way until August 31st for $29.99. It is our promo we're offering right now. Tons of great exclusive content. You can read all of Steve Sipple's columns, all of our exclusive chats and content on the Red Sea Scrolls message board as well. That's HuskerOnline.com for this week's edition of Husker Online Headlines. For Steve Sipple, I'm Sean Callahan.